Martin Luther King Jr., the iconic civil rights leader whose commitment to nonviolent protest transformed the landscape of American society, was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, into a family deeply rooted in the Baptist tradition, with his father, Martin Luther King Sr., serving as pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, a former schoolteacher who instilled in him the values of education and compassion from an early age. Growing up in the segregated South during the Great Depression, young Martin experienced the sting of racial discrimination firsthand, from being denied service at stores to witnessing the pervasive inequalities that defined Jim Crow laws. Yet his childhood was also marked by a nurturing home environment where faith and intellectual curiosity flourished, fostering in him a profound sense of justice and equality that would later propel his activism. At the age of 5, he began his formal education at local segregated schools, excelling academically and skipping grades, which allowed him to enroll at Morehouse College in Atlanta at just 15 years old in 1944, where he studied under influential mentors like Benjamin Mays, the college president who emphasized the social gospel and the role of religion in addressing societal ills, shaping King's evolving worldview toward nonviolent resistance and moral leadership. During his time at Morehouse, King grappled with doubts about entering the ministry, initially pursuing sociology and considering a career in law or medicine. But a profound spiritual calling led him to graduate with a bachelor's degree in 1948 and enroll at Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he delved into the teachings of theologians like Walter Rauschenbusch and Reinhold Niebuhr, and first encountered the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, whose principles of satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance, resonated deeply with King's Christian beliefs in love and forgiveness. Excelling at Crozer, King graduated as valedictorian in 1951 with a Bachelor of Divinity degree, earning a fellowship to pursue doctoral studies at Boston University, where he met his future wife, Coretta Scott, a talented music student from Alabama, and immersed himself in personalism and the works of philosophers like Hegel and Kant, completing his Ph.D. in systematic theology in 1955 with a dissertation on the concepts of God in the thinking of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Weeman. That same year, King accepted the pastorate at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, a move that thrust him into the heart of the civil rights struggle, as the city became the epicenter of resistance against segregation following the arrest of Rosa Parks on December 1, 1955, for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white passenger, an act of defiance that sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, a 381-day campaign organized by the newly formed Montgomery Improvement Association, with King elected as its president at the age of 26. Under King's leadership, the boycott mobilized over 40,000 black residents to walk, carpool, or use alternative transportation, enduring threats, bombings, and arrests, while King preached nonviolence from the pulpit, drawing on Gandhi's methods and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to urge participants to meet hatred with love, a strategy that not only sustained the movement, but also garnered national attention, culminating in a Supreme Court ruling on November 13, 1956, declaring bus segregation unconstitutional, marking King's first major victory and establishing him as a national figure in the fight for civil rights. Emboldened by this success, King co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957, an organization dedicated to coordinating nonviolent protests across the South, with King as its president, aiming to harness the power of black churches to challenge systemic racism through direct action and voter registration drives, while he traveled extensively, delivering over 200 speeches a year and authoring his first book, Stride Toward Freedom, which chronicled the Montgomery experience, and articulated his philosophy of nonviolence as a moral imperative for social change. The late 1950s tested King's resolve, as he faced personal dangers, including a stabbing in Harlem in 1958 while promoting his book, an attack that nearly cost him his life but reinforced his commitment to peaceful protest. And in 1960, he moved back to Atlanta to co-pastor Ebenezer Baptist Church with his father, allowing him to focus more on SCLC activities amid growing tensions in the civil rights movement. The early 1960s saw King intensify his efforts, supporting the student-led sit-ins that began in Greensboro, North Carolina, in 1960, which spread to lunch counters across the South, inspiring the formation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and participating in the Freedom Rides of 1961. Interracial bus trips challenging segregated interstate travel, during which riders faced brutal violence from mobs in Alabama, prompting federal intervention and highlighting the federal government's reluctant role in enforcing civil rights. King's strategic genius shone in the 1963 Birmingham campaign, dubbed Project C for Confrontation, where he and the SCLC targeted what was considered America's most segregated city, organizing marches, sit-ins, and boycotts that provoked violent responses from Police Commissioner Bull Connor, who unleashed fire hoses, attack dogs, and mass arrests on peaceful demonstrators, including children, images of which were broadcast nationwide, galvanizing public opinion and pressuring President John F. Kennedy to propose comprehensive civil rights legislation. During the campaign, King was arrested and penned his seminal letter from Birmingham jail, an eloquent defense of nonviolent direct action against unjust laws, arguing that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and critiquing white moderates for prioritizing order over justice, a document that became a cornerstone of civil rights literature. The momentum from Birmingham culminated in the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963, where over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, and King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, envisioning a nation where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. A masterful oration blending biblical references, American ideals, and prophetic vision that resonated globally and helped secure passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination. Building on this triumph, King turned his attention to voting rights, leading the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965, where on Bloody Sunday, March 7th, state troopers brutally attacked peaceful marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, an atrocity captured on television that shocked the nation and prompted President Lyndon B. Johnson to introduce the Voting Rights Act, signed into law on August 6, 1965, eliminating barriers like literacy tests and poll taxes that disenfranchised black voters, a landmark achievement that dramatically increased African American political participation. For his unwavering dedication to nonviolence amid escalating racial tensions, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 at the age of 35, the youngest recipient at the time, using his acceptance speech in Oslo to affirm that nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral question of our time, and donating the prize money to the civil rights movement, further solidifying his international stature as a symbol of peace and justice. As the 1960s progressed, King expanded his advocacy beyond the South, addressing urban poverty and discrimination in the North, launching the Chicago Freedom Movement in 1966 to combat housing segregation and economic inequality, facing fierce resistance from white mobs and highlighting the pervasive nature of racism nationwide, while he increasingly spoke out against the Vietnam War, viewing it as an unjust conflict that diverted resources from domestic anti-poverty efforts, a stance articulated in his 1967 speech Beyond Vietnam at Riverside Church in New York, where he condemned the war as the enemy of the poor and called for a radical revolution of values, positions that alienated some allies, including within the civil rights establishment, but reflected his holistic vision of justice encompassing peace, economic equity, and human rights. In his final years, King organized the Poor People's Campaign, a multiracial effort to demand economic justice through a march on Washington and the establishment of a tent city, Resurrection City, to pressure the government for jobs, income guarantees, and affordable housing, demonstrating his evolving focus on class issues alongside race. Tragically, on April 4, 1968, while supporting striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, King was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel by James Earl Ray, a shocking act that sparked riots in over 100 cities and plunged the nation into mourning. With his funeral in Atlanta attended by dignitaries and ordinary citizens alike, eulogized by figures like Benjamin Mays, who noted that King gave his life serving the poor of the world. King's legacy endures as a beacon of hope and moral courage, inspiring global movements for equality and nonviolence, from the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa to contemporary protests against racial injustice. With his birthday honored as a national holiday since 1986, and his writings and speeches continuing to educate generations on the power of love to overcome hate. Through initiatives like the King Center in Atlanta, founded by Coretta Scott King, his philosophy is preserved, emphasizing that true peace is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice, a principle that challenges us to confront ongoing disparities in education, criminal justice, and economic opportunity. King's family life, shared with Coretta and their 4 children, Yolanda, Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice, provided a foundation of support amid the perils of activism, with Coretta emerging as a leader in her own right, advocating for women's rights and peace until her death in 2006. His influence extended to international figures like Nelson Mandela, who credited King's methods in dismantling apartheid, and his critiques of militarism remain relevant in debates over global conflicts today. In reflecting on King's journey, from the boy who questioned segregation to the man who mobilized millions, we see a life dedicated to the beloved community, a vision where humanity transcends divisions through empathetic action and unwavering faith. King's early encounters with racism, such as being forced off a bus at age 14 or witnessing his father stand against discrimination, forged his resolve, while his theological studies equipped him with the intellectual tools to articulate a gospel of liberation. The Montgomery bus boycott not only desegregated buses, but also introduced economic boycotts as a potent weapon, influencing future campaigns worldwide. In Albany, Georgia, in 1961 to 1962, King learned from setbacks, refining tactics for Birmingham's success, where the inclusion of youth demonstrators amplified the moral urgency. The I Have a Dream speech, improvised in its most famous sections, drew from King's repertoire of sermons, blending the American dream with prophetic imagery from Isaiah and Amos. Selma's marches, reenacted in films like the 2014 biopic, underscored the violence of voter suppression, paving the way for the Voting Rights Act, though recent Supreme Court decisions have weakened its protections, prompting renewed calls for federal safeguards. King's anti-war stance strained relationships with Johnson and the NAACP. Yet he persisted, linking domestic injustice to imperial policies abroad. The Poor People's Campaign, though disrupted by his death, highlighted intersections of race and class, foreshadowing modern movements like Black Lives Matter. Assassination theories persist, with Ray's conviction amid claims of conspiracy, but King's message endures. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. His memorials, from the National Mall Monument to streets named in his honor, serve as reminders of unfinished work in pursuing equality. Through education programs and annual commemorations, King's dream inspires activism, urging us to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice with persistent, nonviolent effort. King's oratory prowess, honed in pulpits and protests, made complex ideas accessible, as in his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech in Memphis the night before his death, where he prophetically declared, "I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." a poignant farewell that encapsulated his faith in ultimate victory. His impact on legislation, from the 1964 Civil Rights Act to the 1968 Fair Housing Act passed days after his assassination, reshaped America, dismantling legal segregation and opening doors for marginalized communities. Yet, King warned against complacency, noting in his "Where do we go from here?" address that true integration requires economic restructuring to address wealth gaps. Internationally, his Nobel Prize elevated global awareness of American racism, influencing decolonization efforts in Africa and Asia. In popular culture, King's image appears in books, films, and music, from documentaries like Eyes on the Prize to songs by U2 and Common, ensuring his story reaches new audiences. Challenges to his legacy, including FBI surveillance under J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO program, which sought to discredit him through wiretaps and smears, reveal the opposition he faced. Yet his resilience in the face of such adversity underscores the power of moral conviction. As we commemorate his life, we must heed his call to action, recognizing that the struggle for civil rights is ongoing, demanding vigilance against voter suppression, police brutality, and systemic inequities. Martin Luther King Jr.'s advocacy for nonviolent protest not only accelerated civil rights gains, but also modeled a path for ethical dissent, proving that love, when organized and persistent, can indeed conquer injustice and build a more equitable world for all. To delve deeper into his formative years, consider how King's grandfather, A.D. Williams, founded the Atlanta NAACP chapter, embedding activism in the family legacy, or how his travels to India in 1959 to study Gandhi's methods reinforced his commitment to nonviolence, leading to strategies that minimized harm while maximizing impact. The SCLC's role in training activists through citizenship schools empowered grassroots leaders, extending the movement's reach. In Chicago, King's open housing marches exposed Northern hypocrisy, facing stones and slurs, yet yielding agreements on fair housing, though enforcement lagged. His opposition to Vietnam, detailed in speeches like A Time to Break Silence, linked militarism, racism, and materialism as triple evils, a framework still relevant to contemporary critiques of inequality. The Memphis sanitation strike, where workers wore "I am a man" signs, embodied King's solidarity with labor, blending economic and racial justice. Posthumously, his family's advocacy, including Bernice King's leadership at the King Center, preserves his teachings, while annual MLK Day service projects embody his call for community action. Controversies, such as plagiarism allegations in his dissertation or personal life revelations from declassified FBI files, have sparked debates, but they do not diminish his contributions, as historians emphasize the collective nature of the movement he symbolized. King's dream, while partially realized through affirmative action and diversity initiatives, faces setbacks in an era of rising polarization, urging renewed dedication to his principles. Ultimately, Martin Luther King Jr. remains a timeless figure, his voice echoing in calls for unity and justice, reminding us that the pursuit of equality is a perpetual journey requiring courage, compassion, and collective will.